Welcome to Comics Magic, the podcast for comic book creators and Kickstarting. And I am Paul Rashid, co-founder of Comics Magic and creator of the Red Ram. And with me today,
Charles Santino, writer, editor, art director, and packager. Started way back when with Conan, the first time Marvel had it, and right up through working with Bantam Books, Penguin Books, all kinds of publishers. And now I'm working with Marcosia on Rammur, Rammur, the Master Thief in a Future Police State. And Paul has been kind enough to invite me to be an editor slash consultant on a whole bunch of stuff that he's doing. And I said yes, because what he's doing is very interesting. It's very different. And he likes what I have to say. And I want to talk more with people who like what I have to say.
same here. Thank you for that, Charles. Likewise, I enjoy working with you. And that's one thing with Comics Magic that we want to do is really show more of how important an editor can be for a comic book or written work. And I know it's made my works so much better by getting that third person objective perspective. So thanks for joining us. Just curious, how did you start reading comic books?
Way back when, this would have been 1964, around Christmas time. I knew comics were out there, but I had never read one and never purchased one. And my father came home with a copy of Mystery in Space, number 92, which was, or maybe it was 96. It was Adam Strange.
Wow.
And I found it really, really boring, tremendously boring. In fact, I didn't read it then, and I still haven't read it. But it had ads. It had ads for a Sergeant Rock annual and Batman and Superman comics. Now, Superman I knew from the TV show, so I thought that could be interesting. And Sergeant Rock I didn't know, but I watched Combat with the TV show about World War II, which is still considered a classic show, and it's completely out of print, but it's great stuff. I did right out and get a Sergeant Rock comic, and couldn't get into that. I ran out and got a Superman comic, and that was actually even less interesting. It was really boring compared to the TV show. But Batman, okay, I thought this is something else. And a month or two later, the TV show started. I did not
Wow.
know there was going to be a TV show, that my timing was just coincidental. And I really got into the TV show, and I was buying Detective Comics, which featured Batman, and Batman comics, a few others, but mostly those. And for the first year, I was all Batman. The second year, I started mixing in some Marvel.
Oh, and
And
again, though, I mean, so you started reading, I mean, right at the golden age, well, the silver age of Marvel, but
the golden age of the Silver Age.
yes, of Marvel, the creation of Stan Lee's Marvel Universe, that we know today. Wow.
And I picked up the first Marvel comic I picked up was Marvel Collector's Item Classics #1, which reprinted Fantastic Four #3 and Spider-Man, Fantastic Four #2 and Spider-Man #3. And those just absolutely blew my mind, because these stories seem to be about real people, even though they had all these bizarre powers and the stories were very fantastical. They seemed to be real people, and this was a revelation. And it took me a while to dip my toe back into Marvel, but eventually I started buying Marvel. So there was a year overlap where I bought both DC and Marvel. And then by the third year of reading comics, DC was pretty much gone, which was just a shame because I missed a few interesting things. For instance, I caught up with Swamp Thing almost at the end of Bernie Wrightson's run. But eventually, I moved into the Warren black and white horror magazines,
Oh
Mad
wow.
Magazine, the Undergrounds, and by the early '70s, I was pretty much reading anything I could get my hands on.
Wow, that is awesome. So, some things that just stand out to me is that even at a young age, you weren't totally enthralled with some of the first books you got, but the Marvel books really did kind of connect with you, which I've heard that in the media before.
Yeah, they hit pretty hard. There were some DC fans that I knew at the time, and I don't exactly know what they didn't like about Marvel, and I don't exactly know what they liked about DC. But one of the things that I've come to realize more and more over time is that I, and I guess I never realized how much I have a problem with a character if I don't like the costume.
Hmm.
And I like the costumes or designs, if you will, of virtually all the Marvel characters. And a lot of the DC designs and costumes, there's just something off about them to me. Batman and Superman, of course, they're perfect. They are
Yeah.
absolutely perfect in their classic designs. Uh, the Flash, I think, the Silver Age Flash, a really stellar design. There are a few others. The Spectre, I think, is a great design. Deadman, a great design. Uh, Black Canary, of course, you got
Oh
fishnet
yeah.
stocking. Can't go wrong with fishnet stockings. But most of the DC characters, I don't like their design. A design that I've come to appreciate even much more, didn't like the character much at the time, is the Atom, the Silver Age Atom.
Yeah.
Very, very simple, classic design. But that's something that over time I've come to appreciate more. And when I designed Rammur, it went through many, many, many iterations before I arrived at the final design, which you don't want designs to be overcomplicated.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough to make a design that is detailed, but also not so complicated that it's tough to look at. And another thing that some people have said about designs, I agree, is if the character is identifiable in silhouette,
Yeah.
that's a good design.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. How just with your process of designing Rammur, did you sketch it out? Did you have something in your mind? Did your artist give you some options? How did that work out?
The first artist to draw the character or a version of the character was Joe Staton. This would have been 30 years ago, literally. And it was a very
Wow.
different character with a very different concept, but the basic idea was there. And the second artist to tackle it was Andrew Wendell, who did some work for uh, what was Jim Shooter's second company there?
Valiant?
Yeah, Valiant. Did some
Oh,
work for
or
Valiant.
Defiant?
No, Valiant. No, it was
Valiant.
Valiant. Yeah, he did some work for Valiant. Andrew Wendell. Now he does storyboards, and so he was the second artist. And then I gave all of that to a third artist who's done a lot of Rammur for me, Paulo Perez. I gave it back to Joe Staten at that point, and he did another version, and then back to Paulo Perez. So the final design has been through many versions and many hands. And I recently did a Secrets of. So what you've got there with Secrets of is sort of the kind of feature that Marvel used to do in the annuals, where they would show you how the gear worked. So they would show you how Daredevil's gear worked, how
Yeah.
Iron Man's gear worked, Spider Man's senses, and the
Hmm.
costume and web shooter. So I wanted to do something like that because Rammer has some interesting gear, which is hydrogen powered and uses hydrogen atoms to convert to energy.
Love it. Love it. Um, you know, so we mentioned a little bit of how you got into it, what characters resonated with you. How did you get that? And you mentioned you did your first work was at Marvel. Tell me how you got your first writing job.
Well, Savage Tales Volume 2 was kind of a men's adventure anthology. The Raiders of the Lost Ark had been a big hit. Marvel decided to do a kind of a gritty men's adventure, pulpy type of thing. And I thought this would be a good way for me to get in because I could do a short story, no big commitment, and sell it. So I did a Jack London pastiche, a Jack London type of story set in the Arctic, and that was purchased by Larry Hama and published as the last story in the last issue of Savage Tales, Volume 2, Number 8. Beautiful Joe Jusko cover on that.
Wow.
And that led to getting the Conan assignment. A friend of mine, Val Semix, was drawing it at the time. I was at his home. We were hanging out. He got a call from the editor. The editor said, "The writer's gone." And Val called over to me and said, "The writer's gone on Conan." I yelled back, "Ask him if he needs a writer." And he did. And
And this is
so
wait,
Val,
weren't you in college?
no, this was well after. This was
Okay.
10 years later.
Okay.
Val and I did do some stuff for a college paper, a Barbarian type comic for a college paper, but this was 10 years later, and this was
Oh,
Val was already a working pro. I was starting to break in. I had done a novel with Michael McDowell, the guy who wrote Beetlejuice and the TV show Tales from the Dark Side, and then that Savage Tales short story, and then Conan, and Val and I were plotting it together, and he was drawing it, and we did 7 issues together, and
wow.
a bunch of them didn't have any sorcery element whatsoever. We just kind of snuck that in there. The editor didn't seem to mind or notice, and we did it a number of times because we thought Conan was such a great character that we could do a straight adventure story, and that worked out okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that was starting with issue
214.
214,
Yep.
7 issues straight. That's awesome. Um, and then I also like how you, as a reader, you got into the Warren horror comics. You loved Mad Magazine. You have written novels. And these are all just things that I think are great to explore through comics magic, because we're going to get, look at a variety of different genres, and hopefully with, your long career as a writer and editor, and with the different things that we're doing in comic magic, hopefully people will find it interesting and will learn something along the way. And it's going to be for, a variety of creators, and and really focusing on independent creators that want to bring their vision to the world. So you definitely have a background in a variety of things.
Yeah, I'm kind of a stickler for detail when it comes to comics history. Uh, I'll be on various podcasts, and people will be talking and not really knowing what they're talking about, and I will look up the facts and repeat them.
I would definitely say, Charles, you are a stickler, which, you know, I think is a good balance for a creative individual, because, or, and especially in a collaboration, because sometimes I am big picture, broad strokes, and it sometimes helps to get that fine tuning and detail in there. So
And I
it's a
think
good
it's
compliment.
easier. It's easier to have somebody else do it. I know that it bothers the hell out of me when I miss something that I did,
Oh boy!
and I've had people uh, proofread stuff I've written, and the art is done, and now they're proofreading the lettering, and I've had 3 people miss things. But
Wow!
I have found a new proofreader who is just really so careful that I don't think anything is going to get past her. So
Wow!
I'm happy about that.
That's good. Um, what are aren't you working on some other comic book projects besides your own work, Rammur, right now?
I do web comics for Edgar Rice Burroughs, the Tarzan people. But by the time I got there, Tarzan and the science fiction stuff was taken. And I didn't know Edgar Rice Burroughs had written in virtually every genre. So I'm adapting and editing some mysteries and soap opera type stuff, really interesting stuff for them.
Hmm.
I'm also working with Randy Zimmerman and Russ Leach on their Cull continuation. They adapted the Shadow Kingdom, which is really the first sword and sorcery story. It's in the public domain. And then
Wow.
they launched the Atlantean, which is further adventures of Cull. The campaign for number two is ongoing right now. I think there's maybe 10 more days. And I've got a short piece in there about Cull as a teenager meeting some weirdness in the jungle. That It's about, I think it's 8 to 12 pages. My little section. It's very very interesting. I just saw the first pages of art on that, and Russ is doing a great job. And uh, I recommend, even if the campaign is over by the time you see this, you'll be able to buy those issues. It's really classic stuff in the tradition of Savage Sword of Conan,
Hmm.
and Russ is a real mainstream type of artist, harkens back to the 70s black and white magazine era.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I did remember seeing that on your social media. You were sharing that the Atlantean. Very cool. Well, with that, I think we have a great introduction of Charles, our editor, and more to come. So, again, check out Comics Magic on Substack, Blue Sky, Facebook, and YouTube.